Welcome to another episode of the Chris Rod Max Show. Today we have Rod and Max here. It's good to be back. Feels like I missed the world by being gone for a couple of weeks. But yeah, things move. How are you feeling today, Rod?
I'm feeling great, and exactly as you're saying, in our previous episode, people asked me, where is Max? What happened to him? Where were you, Max?
Good question. So for those who are listening, I was actually very ill. Unfortunately, I was traveling to Asia, but I somehow got food poisoning, which is not great. But yeah, I mean, nevertheless, I am fully recovered now. You know, new year, new you kind of thing. And it's good to be back. I've missed doing this, to be honest.
New year, new you. And have you already subscribed to our newsletter, chrisrodmax.com, Max?
Yeah, of course. That's the thing to do, no? If everyone do not know yet, we have a new newsletter which you should subscribe to, where we try to put on all the latest and the greatest news on AI for business up there. So remember to subscribe. Cool. So today, I think, given that we're all coming back from holiday, there's actually quite a lot of action going on for the last 2 weeks or the first 2 weeks of the year. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talk about Brett Smith, the Microsoft president's latest article. And then we're obviously going to spend a little bit of time to talk about Sam Altman's reflection of what he has done for last year, which was pretty eventful from an OpenAI perspective. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time, talk about, some of the Sapphire Ventures top 10 AI trends, and all the way down to, I guess, NVIDIA trying to open source the latest, I would say, acquisition that they did with RunAI. And without further ado, maybe we'll jump straight in. Cool. So I think with the OpenAI, I guess, when we were talking about this, Rod, we spent some time talking about, the biggest protagonists on AI has been the Microsoft, the OpenAI, obviously, when they invest such a huge amount. And in there, we also have, Brett Smith talking about they're going to invest about 80 billion in AI infrastructure for FY 2025. That's 80, guys. That's 80. That's a lot of money. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Rod, what's your take on that? And also, what's your take on the golden opportunity for American AI by Brett Smith?
So for just the number, I was thinking about that. And if you think about that, this is more than the GDP of Sri Lanka or other countries such as Azerbaijan, Tanzania, about the level of Serbia. So in 1 year, Microsoft is investing the same amount of money that a whole country produces for its GDP.
That is crazy. I remember when I was in uni, someone said this before, like Bill Gates is so rich that he could buy Malaysia some time ago or something along that line. It was quite funny. But I guess, now putting this in context, Microsoft is spending 1 year what the entire country make. It's quite amazing. I guess that's what capitalism gets you. And I think in the article as well, to your point, Rod, that's obviously a staggering amount of money. And they're also thinking about, from an American AI perspective, I guess Brett Smith was really pushing for America to do a little bit more from an AI perspective. And it feels like, this kind of plays into the theme of the new administration coming in with the president-elect Trump. And love to get a little bit about your thoughts about how you're thinking, of, I guess, the growth and how you're seeing all the AI development that's going on in the world.
Yes, and this vision, US-China, is really a common theme in our show. So we discuss about all the things that are happening in China that very often we are not really aware of. So, and on one side, we have these developments, but also the politics at play here, they are also fostering them because we're seeing how through legislation, through business decisions and so on, we're seeing a rift between what is happening, let's say, in the Western world with companies such as Microsoft here, but also in China, so all the local players, they're coming out with so many different technologies, architecture, and so on that are just focused for the Chinese market. So here is really a little bit almost as a cold war of sorts in AI that's happening, and then Microsoft, of course, as one of the leading figures, one of the leading organizations for this.
Yeah, that's super interesting, right? So Microsoft obviously has been, spending quite a lot on AI, and especially with the OpenAI investment that we mentioned, and then there's a lot more coming in. I think, in the article, it actually said, more than half of those total investment will be in the US, reflecting the commitment to the country, which is quite interesting. But at the same time, you mentioned about China. Obviously, the Chinese play has always been somehow state subsidized, right? Everything from the exports down to the telco playbook. And I guess the question becomes, does a subsidizing, I would say, playbook be working for the future of AI versus the American way, which is private investment driven growth? I guess love to get a little bit of thoughts on that as well. I think so far sitting in the West, we've seen that the West has obviously been a little bit more, I guess, I would say, open when it comes to investment on the AI. But we also cannot discount what will come out of China in the future.
Definitely. And this number, 80 billion, is justified or can be seen through different prisms. On one side, we're seeing now here politics, where division is West and so on. Also, Microsoft is making the claim that there will be 1 billion AI-enabled jobs, and therefore these individuals will need the tools, will need the technologies. It's necessary, let's say, build the pipelines that will power all this ecosystem of new AI-enabled workers. And it's not only about the infrastructure itself, but also they are arguing that they need to train, just alone in the US, 2.5 million US workers in AI skills. And just this year alone, so 2025, it's a huge number, right? Like 2.5 million workers, allegedly 1 billion future AI jobs and so on. So of course, seen from that perspective, and yeah, so we need 80 billion per year in investment in AI to have the infrastructure in place and everything necessary that foster this innovation and these future jobs.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Maybe just to flip it a little bit, like if AI becomes so proliferated, do we have to be trained to use AI? It's a little bit like how computer is so proliferated. Everyone just know how to use computer in a way, right? I'm just thinking, right? So if you were to learn how to use AI, what would that be? Is it the prompting, talking to AI? How do you structure it? How do you ask it the right question for it to give you the right answer? And I guess the question becomes, what does training to create an AI job actually means? So I'd love to get a little bit of thoughts on that.
We can see that maybe similar to the internet. If we think when data came out, late 90s and so on, there used to be internet cafes. And for example, the Apple stores were a place where people will come for training. How can I send emails? How can I browse through the internet and so on? Now, of course, this is almost like intuitive. Nobody really needs a boot camp or training course. How do I start sending emails? Yeah. And likely at some point, this will happen as well with AI, right? That everything will feel so natural that nobody needs to have it explained. It just like turn on the computer and then open a program, similar. But we're not there now. So if I see how people are, first, the majority of people are still not doing anything AI related. And those who are doing it, I would say they're only scratching the surface. I even see it with myself, how, for example, I prompt, how I work with different technologies and so on. Over the last 2 years, I have significantly matured the way that I interact with these technologies. I'm becoming more sophisticated, but also I develop a feeling of what works well with this specific model. Let's say if I work with, so OpenAI GPT-4o on ChatGPT, I notice these are the type of not only tasks, but also situations where it makes sense to use it. And then I can go to Claude and then use it for a very different use case. And then, for example, Google Gemini. So now it's, for example, for me, a situation where I'm using 3 different LLMs from 3 different providers for different use cases. And developing this understanding and then also knowing when is best for your use case, it requires, well, some exposure to it. So that's already like start, right? Like just understanding, okay, for let's say Microsoft has the Microsoft Copilot, plus of course their investments on OpenAI. Here alone is for them to explain for which use cases this makes sense. You can even see it a little bit, for example, these days in ChatGPT and so on, where before it used to be just like a input, like the prompt, it would be just write something, and that was it. There was an empty input box and nothing else. And it was like a bit
Hmm.
daunting because you didn't know what to write. And now if you look at it, it has this little button saying, I want to write an essay, I want to create an image and so on. And then when you click on them, it pre-fills so that you only need to type, I want to create an image of Mickey Mouse or whatever it is. So people still need this hold this inspiration. What are the things that I can build with these technologies?
Yeah. That's I guess that's super interesting. I mean, reflecting on the usage of AI, I mean, personally, I haven't been prompting as much, but if I were to prompt it a little bit more, I kind of just get a feel of, what works, what doesn't work. It's almost like having a conversation and then try to get a feel of, what's exactly their responses, right? It's a little bit like I would say a stand-up comedian and want to do a lot of all these smaller shows on the side just to get the sense of where the response will come from. So I take it working with AI will be a little bit like that. So that's super interesting.
Why aren't you prompting? So you're saying you're not listening that much. We're in the age of AI. What's stopping you?
So I am prompting, but I felt that I'm not prompting as much. That's one thing. So I do ask it different questions all the time, trying to figure out why this and why not that. I try to do like comparison, for example, trying to find information, for example. I think I do it a lot more on the work context because we have like a safe AI that we could use. Whereas on a personal context as well, I do it more for I would say like searches rather than asking like really hard questions because most of the time I just spend time reading stuff. So maybe I'll do a little bit more, try to compare different texts, for example, making sure that one thing works, whether or not my understanding makes sense, for example. So that's one thing that I try to do a little bit more. Summarization after I've been reading it. So I have a summary on my head and then they do another summarization. Just try to compare notes. It's almost like testing my own brain, if you will.
And you can take it beyond that, for example, as an assistant of sorts, where so you're discussing, for example, your day. In the morning, you say,
Yeah.
today I want to achieve these three things. And then together with something like OpenAI, ChatGPT, you can say, okay, these are my goals for the day through these three. Help me structure it such that I achieve them. And
Yeah.
then they debate and say, okay, well, actually, I would like to do different and so on. And then until you have like a plan. Or also, for example, just life decisions or psychologists that you can think
Mhm.
of where you think, oh, I feel like this, and what should I do? Maybe I feel frustrated about this situation and so on. How should I process it, etc. So I do think that the amount of use cases that we have these days for ChatGPT and similar, it is so wide because they have become so advanced and it's so robust, being able to access the internet and so on.
Yeah.
And you can ask a myriad of questions of all areas of life. And yeah, maybe it might not be like the perfect answer, but at least it will make you think and then point you in a direction that you might not have come up with.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Basically, it acts as a somehow as a idea generation thought process kind of tool as well. And I think that kind of plays into the fact that if they're training 2.5 million people to do that, we probably need to train more people to do that in the future. I guess with that, just to back it up a little bit, on the Microsoft article, there are like quick reference stats that we talk about, right? So number one is the 80 billion Microsoft plan to invest in AI infrastructure. There's also Microsoft also plans to train 2.5 million people in 2025. Also, there is a potential investment fund by BlackRock and MGX of 100 billion onto some of the infrastructure we're talking about. Really, really, really big money. I guess, the question that I have is, we're seeing a lot of money. What sort of returns are we planning? Do you think we'll get from it? It's always the age-old question. Are we actually overestimating it? Or it's just, we're just too early to know, to be honest. So I don't have the answer, but I guess love to hear what the audience says, to be honest. But Rod, if you have some thoughts, that'd be great.
Yes, it's definitely one of these things of, are we building too early? Are we over investing and so on? I just think that right now we need a new narrative in tech. Pretty much all verticals within the technology sector are completely battered.
Mhm.
And AI is the only one that offers a glimmer of hope, and we're investing many is pouring in, where there is like an opportunity or maybe like create like the next set of so relevant companies and relevant embedded stories. And if this doesn't pan out, if in the end it's maybe like too early, if we're talking, let's say this was the internet and we're not in the late 90s, but maybe we're in the early 90s, the late 80s, then likely we need to still wait another 10 years to see the true impact of AI.
Yep.
As a result, the investment done today will be pretty much like wasted. And that can happen. However, there's the counter narrative that maybe now we are at the dawn of a new century of productivity, of advancement, and really these new, so once in a generation companies that are rising powered by AI.
I totally agree. I think there's a famous saying, right? Like the optimist makes money, the pessimist likes to be right. So I am very, very positive in the sense that, some of this technology would definitely play into our role one way or the other. I would argue it's probably already there. It's just if you look hard enough. Speaking of looking hard enough, so Sam Altman obviously recently published an article on his own blog on the reflection of what happened on last year, right? Basically, it was for those who don't follow this very, very closely, Sam Altman obviously was ousted and then reinstated as a CEO. Then a couple of co-founders left, but in the middle of all this, OpenAI was still growing quite significantly, right? So I think there was a stat that went from 100 million to 300 million weekly active users. I guess the question is, obviously there's a question on how many of them are actually using it all the time. But, even just 100 million to 300 million, that's a staggering number on top of everything that's going on. I think it's quite interesting to actually peel back to how Sam thinks about this, right, Mr. Altman, when all these things were going on. I think love to hear your thoughts, Rod. What's your take on the article?
Yeah, so it's a reflection of what was definitely for him and for the whole organization a very tumultuous but also impactful year. So the point, Max, of how many people are actually, let's say, like paying for ChatGPT or how big is this is it's estimated that now ChatGPT is generating $2.7 billion every year on subscriptions. People who are paying $20 per month. I mean, how many companies can claim that they generate this amount of money? Is astronomical.
Yeah.
And this is something that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, didn't exist at all. This is really one of these once in a generation companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's quite amazing, right? If you think about it, so they set up 2016 to try to build AGI. It took them, 6, 7, 8, 9 years to actually build it. But and when it tried to figure out, so he actually reflected on the fact that, when they tried to figure out what would the product look like, they went with the text prompting way of doing it. Turns out that was the moment. They always believed it was going to be big, but just didn't know when. So it's quite amazing to know that, if you keep working on something, if you truly believe in it, you kind of just, execute and make it happen. And the money, I feel like it's just I would say a follow on from what actually happened, right? It's almost like, they set their mind on trying to build something great, and then the money kind of just follow from that.
But then in retrospective, then of course we rationalize and we say, yeah, we always knew that it would turn out this way and I was confident of that and so on. But I remember people back in 2018, 2019 being extremely skeptical about OpenAI, was basically saying now OpenAI is neither open nor is really AI and so on. So they were thinking, okay, this is some sort of like grief that is happening. Turned out to be very different. However,
Yeah.
it could have been as well that they do not achieve what they were said to do. So, for example, something that for me is also been an eye opener is self-driving cars with Waymo, where for many years until now, it has been almost estimated self-driving cars with our current technology is almost impossible. It will not happen. But Waymo has been showing that you do not need to have self-driving cars across all cities and all roads, but just focus on the big markets, metropolitan areas, and just a selected few. put as much data as you can for these specific areas, and that's enough to provide a good service that can be as large as an Uber. And for example, in the case of here of Waymo, you need to have, for example, the service in every city in the UK, but maybe just London, Manchester, maybe a tier one, and that's it. And with that, you cover 60, 70, 80% of the relevant market. And all of a sudden, you have viable business models for self-driving cars. Same here with OpenAI. It could happen as well that it will not be a viable business. But now, just by focusing on the pure chat without thinking about image generation, video, whatnot, they have created this 2.7 billion business.
Technology that you felt that you could, I will make something great out of it. You kind of just go and build it, right? I think in the article, he actually made the bold claim that, they now know, or they now confident on how they would build an AGI. And then he foresee that in 2025, they see AI agents join the workforce. So, similar to your point around Waymo, it feels like, it doesn't have to have AI agent joining all the workforce. If they find a few places that they can deploy AI agents, that in itself would have been a super big business, right? It doesn't have to be, all the $20 subscription. It could be the, $200 million subscription with larger corporates. So it's quite fascinating to see how this will work out. What I also find fascinating is if this truly happens, like the Waymo as well as the AI agents, joining forces, I feel like the whole social structure and the entire, I would say, world as we know it will change a lot. What it also taught me that, dream big and just go for it. So those are a couple of things that I guess I take away from the reflection itself.
Absolutely, Max. And so this quote on the AI agents, the 2025. So Sam Altman estimates that we'll be seeing the first AI agents. Last week with Chris, we were also saying that this year will be the year of the agent. And I was just thinking now from a business model perspective. Let's think that an agent is capable of doing around, maybe let's say 20% of the work of a junior employee, like entry level. And the salary of a junior employee, let's say, is around like $50,000, right? So then they can pretty much accrue the value, obtain the value of 20% of this 50,000, right? So here, let's say like 10,000. And they say, okay, 10,000 is maybe too much, so we'll charge 5,000. We're 5,000 for our agents. And just think about, so the million of businesses that will say, hey, for $5,000 per year, I can get pretty much, so almost like a junior employee. I mean, almost everyone will jump on that. So even if really you do not consider that it's relevant for you now, there are so many cases where you say, hey, how much more could I do if I would just have like an extra pair of hands? And you say, no, I will not hire it because until I get this person, I don't need it anymore. And also, of course, I need to onboard it and so on, right? So it takes time, it takes money, etc. But then all of a sudden, pretty much on demand, you can get like a virtual worker to do something for you. And for the cost of only, say, like 5,000 per year, this will be again like another 5 billion or more likely that will be generating revenue from millions of organizations that will be ready to have these workers. And likely you will not have just one of these agents, because how these companies like OpenAI, so Salesforce and so on, they're trying to structure it is more about, let's say, like the personalized profiles, right? So, okay, you want to have like multiple tasks. Let's say you want to have 3 max, you have to pay for 3 of them. You not pay for 1 of them. So we're not talking about like 5,000, we're talking about 15,000. So I just think that on one side, this will be a massive value generator for companies. And we have to see what will happen with the workforce. This is like a separate question, but just is like, again, another, so the next thing.
Yeah, I feel like the workforce question, maybe it will answer itself. That's what I felt it will be, because we as humans will find things to do one way or the other, right? If this thing doesn't require us, you probably free you up time to do a little bit more of other stuff. So eventually you'll get to that. But when it comes to value generation, I totally agree. It's a matter of, turning labor into almost like putting labor onto internet, right? The special thing about internet is that you're able to replicate something endlessly with very, very low cost or zero cost. So if you're able to turn some labor, especially on the, I guess, white collar job, and as also robots with blue collar jobs, you'll be able to increase productivity quite significantly. So yeah.
To our previous segment on Microsoft AI education and so on, and why do I need that? Something that might happen is that working with an AI agent, as let's say my virtual assistant, my virtual coworker, and so on, becomes a new baseline. So then when you got
Mm-hmm.
a job, people will they will be expecting that you can use these technologies, and this will become the new baseline. And then another person, your peer comes, and then just a company. This person is not acquainted with AI. So all of a sudden, if for example, thanks to the AI, you're now 30% better, and this is the new baseline, then this person is only 70% of what you can provide, and this person suddenly is considered an underperformer, and likely this person will not survive in the workplace.
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a little bit like when you join the workforce. I think in the 90s, if you know how to use computer, you're almost like ahead of a lot of people, right? And then after that, in the 2000s, if you join the workforce, you know how to somehow read.com, being able to do all this. It's ahead. If you go into like 2010, if you know how to use social media, and you're somehow ahead. So it's almost like it's almost like a different platform shift, if you will, right? So we kind of just adapt to the reality and then figure out how to use certain technology to make life better and make yourself stand out. So I feel like AI will probably be no different. So I think I'll take your advice, Rod, and do a lot more prompting so that I don't get replaced by more agents. Oh, actually, my job is to replace myself with more agents, and then I can do a little bit more other stuff.
Who knows? Exactly that happens, right? Like you can put that on
Yeah.
autopilot, and then you're just
Yeah.
busy doing other things, enjoying life, and all of a sudden, all these virtual maxes are replying emails. Another thing about this article that caught my eye was on the naming. So Sam Altman was sharing, so that they want to call it initially chat with GPT 3.5, and yeah, you think that even people who are very smart, they can come up with very bad names.
That's quite funny. They just decided that, ChatGPT, off you go. But I guess in the end, it's not the naming that matters, right? It's the thing that works that matters. So maybe that's the takeaway. Cool. And if I were to just shift gears a little bit, Rod, we also have another article that Sapphire, which is a venture arm, talk a little bit about top 10 AI trends. One of the interesting things that caught my eye was 2024 saw a staggering amount. It says staggering. Wait for it. It's 45 billion poured into AI startup. That's roughly 50% of what I guess Microsoft is going to invest in 2025 into AI infrastructure. But it's a lot. You can create a lot. So that's just to give you like context, right? How much 80 billion really is. And then people are also, I guess, forecasting that in 2025 they're going to be even more funding going into all these AI startups. I guess the stat is there's a 70% increase in AI funding from 2023, and then the question is, will this actually continue in 2025? And I guess if not, how long can it go from a funding perspective? Is there an exit route for some of these AI companies, or will they become so big and start replacing some of the incumbents, which means the value accrual will happen when some of the older incumbents tend to just whittle away. So love to get your thoughts, Rod, on this as well.
So when I was looking at the number touted here of 45 billion was invested in AI companies last year, of course it sounds like it's an astronomical amount of, but then we gotta ask ourselves, where has it been invested, and has it been really spread across a wide range of companies, or it has been concentrated among selected few? And Databricks, just before the year ended, they raised 10 billion. So that's basically like 1/4 of the amount that was for the whole market was alone for one company. And therefore, what we have to see here is what we were discussing previously. AI is the only narrative at the moment that is triggering fantasies of growth, potential, and so on. But this remains, for the large part, also restricted to a selected few. I'm sure that just by looking at the number of deals that has happened, and here, Max, you have a much broader perspective. You're always looking at a deal book and all these sources. So do you think that we're seeing a similar amount of AI companies being funded like last year versus previous years when SaaS was all the rage?
I definitely see a lot more AI companies. I must say. Okay, so I also felt that building companies has become a lot easier, and people are just finding different ways to build stuff. So that's actually a good thing. Based on what we've seen so far, we've seen a lot of AI companies, as in AI native companies that built using AI. We're also seeing a lot of like SaaS companies that try to be AI companies, and so there's also a little bit of that from raising funding perspective. For example, they will be doing some sort of like, I don't know, let's say supply chain data. And somehow AI came into the narrative. They just entirely spin their wheels into AI company, and suddenly they become an AI company. And when they raise capital, they would be classed as AI companies because despite the fact that they've been around for, I don't know, 10 years as a SaaS company, what actually got them known for it's actually the AI stuff. So I think to answer your question, I think is there more AI companies now versus during the peak of SaaS company? I will need to look into the data to really know that.
Hmm.
But based on what I'm seeing now, probably, and that's only because there are new AI companies as well as SaaS companies trying to be AI companies, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good to know that there is investment coming and being put on young new companies. Because the other thing is, for example, when we talk about some of the companies mentioned in this article, CoreWeave, Scale AI, Databricks, and so on, these are not first not startups in the sense of the amount of money that has been poured into them, but also their age. So like Scale AI, they was started I think like in 2017, CoreWeave also like 2016, and so on. Databricks, there was already Databricks back in 2013 or something. So we're talking pretty much of decade-old organizations that
Hmm.
cannot be considered anymore as a startup. From the article, that also they were talking about Palantir. Palantir for me has been a fascinating case, Max, where I remember when they had their IPO, it was pretty much so labeled as, let's say, like the Ferrari of data visualization, where
Yeah.
there are so many data visualization tools like business intelligence and so on. Like the narrative was, so Palantir is exactly in this space, but they are targeting just let's say, like the cream of crop, and that's why they can command so high prices, and that's like their focus. However, for those who knew more about the organization and knew people working there and so on, and Palantir was for a very, very long time pretty much like an Accenture so Wipro of sorts, as like IT consulting for data, for like data science and so on, where it will be very like person heavy, very like operations heavy, and they will have maybe like some building blocks, but then there will be nothing that will really plug and play. And the
Yep.
fascinating part is how for the past 2 years, they have reinvented themselves, or at least reinvented their narrative, to be seen as one of the most relevant AI companies in space, first, and second, this heavy focus on the defense sector.
Yeah. I think one thing also I realized, as long as you don't give up, you cannot lose. You just have to keep going. Depending on what the narrative is, you just ride the wave in a way, right? That's why for a short while, every company is a fintech company, and then now every company is an AI company. It's a little bit like that. Um, but I mean, to your point around the longevity of certain companies that have been around and whether or not they could still be called startup. In my head, I felt like after a certain revenue and after a certain size, I don't think you can actually call yourself startup per se. And I think especially when you cross certain type of revenue, like I just felt that you're really no longer a startup because you're really big. But in terms of age, I felt like because your revenue hasn't got there, so you still have some ability to I guess morph yourself into something else. Because the way you think about it is every single startup is almost like an experiment. Certain experiment might work, so it might become big. Certain experiment might not work, so you just need to start molding yourself accordingly. So I felt that there are definitely that's why I mentioned there are some SaaS companies that coming out as an AI company because they're able to pull some data and that AI kind of just transform how they could potentially add value in whatever they're doing. And also they already have the existing customers penetration, which helps them to sell even faster and quicker. So we're seeing a lot of that as well. I think
Yes, yes. I want to say also, not only about the age of the companies and like the focus and so on, this article gave me something to think about on how so far we haven't really seen personal AI assistants. So where if we think about, for example, like science fiction or comics and so on, we always have Jarvis, we always have the
Mhm.
idea that there will be some sort of like little helper that will be completing task for us. But so far, it doesn't really happen, right? Like you were mentioning, how do you use ChatGPT? You use it as like a search engine. You ask questions, things that you want to know, things that you want to get an understanding. However, ChatGPT is not really completing tasks for you. ChatGPT is not a personal AI assistant. Do you think
Yeah.
2025 will be the year when we'll see actual personal assistants?
I mean, I will not go against Sam Altman, but I think when it comes to AI agent, you could already get it to do some smaller task for you from a personal assistant perspective, right? So you don't hire a personal assistant to do everything for you. Today, even if you hire a virtual assistant, you basically get them to help you to, I think, process some sort of payments, help you to sift through your email, help you to do some sort of, I will call scheduling, for example. I feel like you can actually do that with AI agents already. And I personally try to build like a little agent to help me to do market research, right? Which, as I mentioned before, and that is still going. I still use that as a quick way to do market research. So to answer your question, I think, do I see personal AI assistant for specific tasks? Absolutely. Will it one day be able to cover all my needs? I also think so because you just build on top of
Hmm.
the other AI agents, right? So if this AI agent can schedule for me, this AI agent can reply cordially to certain types of email, and then they could speak to each other and eventually just give me a full range of what are the things that I could do. So I think 2025 we'll see more of that.
One of the limiting factors was the type of models that, so what we had on the market was pretty much really good question answering models.
Mhm.
However, they were not that good at more like logical tasks, more like planning and so on. So creating like so fragmenting a task into multiple tasks, like the classic divide and conquer principle, the
Mhm.
models will be very, very lousy at this type of so activities. So, for example, if we say, "Hey, I want to plan my day," and then like a normal human will think, "Okay, then I need to think, how do I do hour by hour? And maybe I want to have maybe like an objective for the hour and so on, right?" Like we will think the major goal, and then intuitively we'll be segmenting this into sub goals and so on, and until we have manageable chunks, and then we start filling these chunks with information. Something like this that for us feels so intuitive until very recent. It was very difficult for any type of AI system to do. But now
Mm.
with the latest reasoning models, as they call it, this is becoming so possible. So yes, I think this mix of what you're saying, AI agents plus reasoning models that are appearing might make now possible that we have any type of AI assistance. And this is also a little bit like what OpenAI is trying to do with they so a few weeks ago they had this new pro tier where like for normal for anyone who is a mortal, you're paying $20 per month that use the service. There is a, let's say, like VIP service where you're paying $200, like 10 times more per month. And the difference behind is that you get access these reasoning models, you get a much larger allocated capacity.
Mhm.
And then if you're, for example, thinking of this type of like planning task and type of like more like logic oriented problems and so on, then it might make sense for you. So who knows? Maybe now we will be soon, instead of paying $20 per month, all of us will be like upgrading the 200 per month. And then if these numbers continue, OpenAI goes from becoming a
20 billion.
two exactly.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think if you go 10 times, that's mad. And I think, the monetary opportunity here is definitely big. I think to your point, right, when it comes to science fiction, that was fiction then, but a lot of people built towards those fiction and eventually get us where we are today. I think we are just really getting started. Especially even if I look at all the things that I do day to day, we are just really at the cusp of getting there. So, if whoever is listening to this, you want to do something, I think AI will be a cool way to help you to achieve some of the things that you're trying to do, or even experiment with it just for the fun of it. So I just felt it's super interesting. I think even in the article, right, they talk about a lot of AI native startups actually generating 50 million in ARR and growing at the north of 50%. They also talk about, how, fully AI generated media might hit top 20 charts in music, short form video, and all daily podcasts. And to a certain extent, I already know some companies that are already generating podcasts using Gen AI alone, basically just two folks talking to each other about the markets that's going on. I find that so fascinating. We'd love to see that happening. If those things start to happen, I felt like the monetary opportunity, Rod, to your point, not just for OpenAI, but for all those that are building for other things, would also, I guess, increase quite exponentially. So yeah, I think I'll come back to my last point. We're just getting started.
I also very
Yeah.
curious how it pans out with what you're describing, for example, now of fully AI generated podcasts where you have two AI voices talking to each other and having a conversation, how this will be so received by the market, by audiences, if they flock into this type of content, or this becomes, let's say, like empty calories that people say, yeah, it's fine. But in the end, if I want the nutritious value, if I want to have high quality, then I will always reach out for human content. I want to listen to other humans. I want to see other humans. I'm very curious about that because now, for example, there was this announcement by Meta that they have been trying already for a while, and now they're trying it again, of starting to replace, or not replace, but insert in their social networks, Instagram, Facebook, and so on, AI profiles. And these AI
Yeah.
profiles are capable of interacting with you. If you send a message saying, hi, how are you? Then they reply back and so on. And they have personas. So there's one that is like the dating coach. There's the one that is like your favorite mom. There's the other one that is so your cool friend, etc. So they have these personas. And the idea is that so people who maybe like feel lonely or people who are looking for like advice of sorts, they can interact with these profiles. But so far, it has been rather a negative feedback they've been getting to the point that these profiles that they put online, they took them down like almost like a few hours after it went live. So I'm very, very curious if indeed we start consuming more and more pure AI generated content. Let's say one thing is, of course, have like some sounds, music, maybe some videos happening while we're talking, so that make it more entertaining. This is one thing. But another thing is if, as you were describing, podcasts start being, and not only podcast videos and other type of content, start being purely AI generated, and there's no human at all. And people say, yeah, this is cool, I want to consume it. Will you consume it? Are you consuming them?
I think I do. I definitely do. I think, what was I doing? I think, for example, right, if you watch this anime today, it's entirely drawn by humans and they were really cool. And, some people does it really slowly. But then I will also, personally, I don't think I will shy away from watching an AI generated short film, for example. I will find it quite fascinating to see that, number one. I think number two, if you start adding personality to AI, that kind of creates a whole new entity of, things that you can talk to. I actually thought about this the other day. You know how people like to watch live streams nowadays, especially like TikTok live, in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, they are quite famous when it comes to like watching live and then buy things online, or even in China. I thought about if you could you do that, using AI, literally just green screen, you have an AI personality that is basically talking about whatever it is they want to sell on a live stream perspective, because that will save the company the time to go hire a personality to do that. Basically, just use AI to try to sell those items. And then my question then becomes, how believable are those AI models or AI personas? I actually felt that people might actually go for it, especially when we we're in front of the screen so much, we sometimes can't really discern what's true, what's not. It will be with facts, photos, all the same. So I think there will be tools that eventually will develop how to tell what's what. But at the same time, there will be a portion of society that would actually consume it. I think that's just how I felt. And I will be curious to give it a try, to answer your question.
We're saying with anime, generated anime, I can imagine that. So because a few things. One, you can create the script, the plot, let's say through ChatGPT. Then video, you use Sora or other video generating models for anime. And in the end, it's just animation, cartoons, and so on, right? The voices, historically, the voices of for like AI cartoons or in general cartoons, it's not something the best, right? So it's not like it's super believable or you like super like it. Like no one really watches any type of B anime or just general cartoons for children and adults because of the voice talent. It's for the reasons that you watch them. So if it is purely generated AI voices, it will be perfectly fine. And I can see that. I can see indeed that, for example, something like children cartoons or entertainment for adults, animation for adults, such as anime or just so cartoons for adults, this can become purely AI generated in that, for example, you say, hey, I want to have like a cyberpunk so anime, just the fact that are they. So I was thinking myself, what happened to cyberpunk, Max? I don't know, like it used to be like a genre in entertainment that it was like everywhere, especially like anime. So many series and so on about cyberpunk. And now this day, I feel it has disappeared. I feel like maybe because our reality is cyberpunk style, where we live in small spaces, we're lonely, things look maybe like falling apart and so on. And then, so there's no need to see reality. But then, for example, those who are, let's say, craving for some cyberpunk, they can say, hey, I want to have a series where there is a female lead and it is set in a cyberpunk future. And then after half an hour, you have like the 10 episodes generated by AI. That could happen.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happen, right? There's also, I felt that because they're going to be, I guess even now, there are endless amount of content online, right? Sometimes, let's say, if you have a kid, what are you going to do? What are you going to show them, right? You'll probably hear it from other parents to show them some of the better ones. But then I'm thinking, if this tool makes it so accessible, you could potentially just write a story using AI, generate some sort of cartoon, and then, using that cartoon to teach your kids a certain value. So I find that quite interesting. You kind of democratize content to the extent that I will be able to extend that to, I guess, my kids, just from a storytelling perspective. And then will we then be able to extend that from a presentation perspective, right? So now you know how presentation, they like to use persona, for example, like, oh, imagine if you are a, I don't know, small shop owner, and then you have to, you have to make payments, you have to prepare your food, but then it's so slow. And then there's Square to help you to do all the payments. I felt that, if you're able to do, I guess you don't need people to act it out. And all these corporate videos can technically be created with AI. Pretty short. So totally. Just a thought.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right on that, Maxwell, because also our thing I was thinking just now was, for example, so for children and so on, parents, they want that their children have a specific an exposure, the specific type of themes, values, and so on. Some parents might prefer, okay, I want to emphasize religious values or community values and so on. And for others, it might be less relevant. Very often what happens is that a parent needs first to watch whatever it is on YouTube or shows that see, okay, do I approve it for my child? And only then the child is allowed. But what is if you're saying, you're just describing, I want to have a TV show for children that touches these points, have this plot, it's generated, and then you have full trust that whatever is generated will be what you approve, and you can just give it away to your child. That would be fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I felt that could be quite interesting, but obviously it will shape the next generation of kids, right? So the next generation of kids are watching YouTube growing up, right? Everywhere you go, most of their parents will give their child an iPad or a phone to watch some videos. Sometimes I don't even know. I don't know if this thing called Happy Free Friends. Let's just say it's definitely not super child friendly, but it was drawn in a very nice way, right? So sometimes when child watch YouTube videos, it kind of just play out. I remember having a conversation with my brothers. I don't think this is what a children should watch, but we did see a child watch that. So I thought that there will be a lot of different use cases once the tools become available. I think coming back to the point of, we're just really getting started. Cool. Sorry, I think we kind of just kind of get ahead and over ourselves. I think in the interest of time, we have one last segment, which is NVIDIA. I want to talk a little about this. Just interesting to get your take. We all know now NVIDIA is the darling of AI. Everybody wants their chip, and we also know that NVIDIA bought RunAI 700 million. And now they decided to open source the software of what they bought with RunAI. I guess, Rod, what's your take on this?
It's very, I would say that there are multiple ways how this can be seen. The way that I see it is the following. So here RunAI was originally more like an academic project, and they had been around for many years, way before all this AI boom and so on. So the roots are more in exactly that, in offering an open source tool. And I can imagine that the talent, the people behind say, hey, we want to continue working on this, we want to continue like covering the community. And NVIDIA is such a large organization, is a massive, so let's say like a so octopus full of tentacles, all type of business units and so on, that if this 700 million investment that for NVIDIA is pocket change, is focused only on open source, no cost or pretty much easily accessible software, is partly fine, because this serves pretty much as a further marketing acquisition channel. So through this, they support the developer community. Developers are happier. They strengthen their bond with NVIDIA. NVIDIA at the same time can be seen as a good player, a good steward of the AI community, not as these monopolies. It's not, let's say, like a Microsoft in the 90s, where it was pretty much buying everyone and and imposing their will on everyone else and so on. But rather, let's say, this friendly player who just wants to grow the ecosystem and is offering a fair chance to everyone and so on. So I just think that from the PR value and for what it's bringing for the community, it makes all sense. And in the end, this acquisition is so irrelevant in the big scheme of things for NVIDIA, that even if it doesn't pan out, and even if it's not a good idea, they offer this for free instead of commercializing it, that doesn't really change anything for NVIDIA.
That's very true, right? What's 700 million when they have a market cap of 3.56 trillion? It's probably still hot. It's still going. I don't really know what's NVIDIA's market cap today. I didn't actually check.
And also, Max, I mean, you're in the investment space. How often do M&A has a positive ROI?
Oh, not very often. At least the joke that is going on all the time is majority of acquisition actually ended up failing. Which is true. And very, very, very little M&A actually make it out very well when it comes to deliver commercial returns. I think in this context, if this is an antitrust dodge, right, as they classed it, I actually think it's quite a smart play. And then to yourself as well, Rod, to your point, that this could also be enriching the community, the developer community more. So I actually would be quite interested to actually ask someone on the corp dev team of NVIDIA, what are you thinking? Why do you do this? So that they cannot run from the question. But yeah, I think to answer your question, most of it doesn't work out. But this could actually be one of a smarter chess play. Who knows? I guess with that, we're on top of the hour, slightly over. I think we really enjoyed the chat. And just to run up, really quickly, today we talk a little bit about, the golden opportunity of American AI by Brett Smith, the Microsoft president. We talk a little bit about Sam Altman's blog post, the reflection of his year building OpenAI. We also spent some time talking about Saphire's top 10 AI trends and predictions. And then lastly, we talk about, NVIDIA open sourcing RunAI. As usual, we really enjoy doing this. If you like what you're hearing, share it with your friends, comment or like the post. And we really appreciate any feedback that you have. It is only your feedback, you listening, could help us improve the podcast. And with that, thank you so much again for joining us for another episode, and happy 2025. May this year be the year of agent and whatever it is that you have going on. Thank you very much, and tune in for the next one.
And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter on chrisrockmax.com.
Good one, Rod. And subscribe. Just do what Rod says.